Dear brothers and sisters, my warmest welcome to our podcast, Creativity and Crisis. My name is Dr. Glenn T. Martin. For a number of years, I've been president of the World Constitution and Parliament Association, an organization working to address planetary crises and to establish an enduring and liberating future. I'm also a philosopher by profession who loves thinking, creative vision, and inspiring ideas. My newest book is called The Earth Constitution Solution, Designed for a Living Planet. In these podcasts, I dialogue with prominent thinkers, scholars, and activists who are similarly concerned about the multitude of crises confronting humanity. Are there creative and practical solutions, and how can these be achieved? I hope our listeners will stay with us and join us in the thought processes that have become so necessary in our quest to create a decent planetary civilization for everyone. My Creativity and Crisis partner today is Arthur Conagus. He is a film producer, an actor, a director, a podcaster, and he is president of Future Wave, which is an organization working to convert the culture of violence to a culture of peace. He's also well known for being the producer and scriptwriter for The World Is My Country, a major film about the life and work of Gary Davis, who worked for democratic world government throughout his lifetime. This film has won numerous awards and is being widely seen as we speak. I highly recommend it. I've seen it for myself. Well, Arthur, I'm very glad to have you with us on this podcast, Creativity and Crisis. For many years, you've been working on promoting Earth Federation. You were producing the film on Gary Davis, My Country is the World. I assume you must think that the world has a crisis or a collection of crises altogether. Do you think you could describe your thinking about this for us?
Well, the bulletin of the atomic scientist says we're 100 seconds from a midnight, unimaginable catastrophe, really the end of life on Earth. And essentially, what they're talking about is that in the extent of time, if you thought of the extent of time as a 24-hour clock, we're at that 100 seconds away from the end of life. This is something that's motivated me since I was a child. I mean, I remember back when I was in high school, I was, very active. We were told we were supposed to go, hide under our desks when the nuclear war came and put our heads in place. And I refused. I said, I'm not going to do that. I said, if you've seen the pictures of Hiroshima, our school, we're in Washington, D.C. Our school's going to be leveled. There's not going to be any desks to hide under. And I was sent to the principal's office for refusing to get under my desk. And, I had a series of events like that all through school. But then I joined Mensa. It's supposed to be the people you take an intelligence test and you have a high IQ, you can get into this, in the top percent group. And I was in the top of their top. So I got in this group and I thought, okay, here's some people who, are finally going to work with me and help me, to save the world. And I was like floored. I mean, they were all interested in playing, games and some of them were politically for like Barry Goldwater, who wanted to head toward a war with Russia. And I thought, oh my God, if, the whole idea of evolution was we're supposed to gain brains so that we can evolve for survival of the species. And if the people with brains aren't working for survival of the species, oh my God, we're doomed,
Yeah.
And so I was very good at physics and science, but I said, I'm not going to do that. I mean, of course, people in school were encouraging me to go in that area. I said, I'm going to go into political science because what we really need is, we don't need another invention to save the world. There are millions of people making inventions from how to clean the carbon out of the air to, just incredible inventions left and right. But the problem is that there's not the political system that enables them. There's a broken political and economic system that blocks this incredible genius of humanity from coming forth and solving the problems. We've got the key, we've got the ability. So I think the key problem we face is that we've developed a system that's created this military industrial complex, this economic system that's a race to it's a democratic system that's a race to the bottom, the lowest common denominator, and it's an economic system that's really a race to doom. Eisenhower warned us years back about the incredible power of the military-industrial complex, every state house, every government. And he said, if we don't stop this, the best to be hoped for is a life of perpetual fear and tension, the inability to solve the needs of our people. And, just he went on and on, a beautiful, beautiful statement. Look at it. Right. And then, but he said, and the worst, of course, is atomic war. And President Kennedy gave that same warning. He said, the weapons of war must be abolished before they abolish us. Well, why haven't we heeded those? Well, I'll tell you why we haven't heeded them. Here's an important article that explains it. 26 years after Eisenhower spoke in 1987, one of the founding fathers of the first Cold War, the distinguished George Kennan, predicted this. He said, were the Soviet Union to sink tomorrow under the waters of the ocean, the American military-industrial complex would have to remain substantially unchanged until some other adversary could be invented. Anything else would be an unacceptable shock to the American economy. That's Kennan back in 1987. Now, here's the thing. We did that after the Cold War did collapse. And then what happened? They had a couple of two-bit enemies. They had Panama. They couldn't get up a good war over Grenada. So then they came up with this brilliant idea of a war on terror, a war that would never end. You could keep, every time you fought it, you would create more terrorists. And it was just, it was the perfect thing to keep this going. And billions and billions have gone into, trillions have gone into that, with no increase in security whatsoever. I mean, as Gary Davis says in our film, The World is My Country, there's no security.
At my university here, Radford University, I had Noam Chomsky come as a guest speaker in 1995, right? It was only 4 years after the end of the Cold War. And Chomsky said the same thing that you were just quoting from Kennan and so on. He said that they're looking now for a new enemy. It isn't, he said all this expectation of peace after the end of the Cold War is an illusion. And at that time, it was the war on drugs, as you said, in Panama. He pointed that out, and he said, but that's not sufficient. They're still looking for a new one. And of course, like a miracle on their behalf, 9/11 happened. We had this attack coming from outside onto our country, and people were galvanized to focus on this new enemy that you're mentioning, the war on terror, right? So my experience really coalesces with yours very closely.
That's absolutely key. There's a wonderful film. It's called Youth versus Gov. And it's about these young people who sued the government for denying them a future for climate change. And they document in it, and they have it beautifully on screen, that almost every single president, from Bush and so on, they all gave incredibly beautiful lip service to the absolutely crucial need to stop environmental damage, to stop the big oil, all these things. Great, great statements. And then they've gone on to actually, every one of them, serve big oil and make it actually worse. Right. And why? Is it because these presidents are liars? No, it's because we're trapped in an economic system where they have no choice. Back in the early days, back in Jefferson's day, corporations were set up under the government of the people to serve a particular need, like to build a railroad. They had a 20-year charter. If they didn't serve that need, their charter would be pulled, and it would be renewed if the government needed it again, right, and the people needed it again. But what happened is, because these corporations were operating globally and we, the people, are locked in these boxes called nation states, they could say, well, if you control our pollution, if you want to tax us, we'll just move abroad. So we had to say, oh, no, please stay. We want your job. And so we became they became the masters. They had all the money. They buy all our politicians. It doesn't matter if you're the saint in the White House. They're all stuck in this same broken system. And it's a system that will continue until we, the people, find a way to break out of that box.
And the system perhaps is not simply corporations, but you're absolutely right that the corporations have institutionalized themselves as perpetual persons, right, who never can die and have all these rights of individual persons. But the system perhaps is capitalism itself, in that, as Karl Marx pointed out way back in the 19th century, it is essential that it grow. It's a system of growth. The very name, capitalism, capital has to be invested and reinvested, and it's always reinvested with an idea that it's going to grow. But the environmentalists, from Kate Raworth and her popular new book, Dona Economics, Donella Meadows, who in 1972 came out with this book, The Limits of Growth, Richard Heinberg, who talks about the same thing. All of them say you cannot have infinite growth on a finite planet, right? If we're going to have environmental sustainability, we have to have an economic system that is not predicated on growth and means a global transformation of the way we relate to one another economically.
Have that power to make an actually a better world if we do that with regenerative agriculture and with all those things.
Yes.
But we're stuck in a broken system, a broken political and economic system that keeps us tied in. Now, one of the great things, the reason I made this movie about world citizen number one, Gary Davis, is he came to a startling realization. It's right there in front of us. It's been in all our civic books, but none of us ever quite saw it. First of all, he originally tried to do what so many people tried to do, get the nation states to reform themselves. In fact, he interrupted a session of the United Nations and specifically directly talked to world leaders. He was an actor, once he realized that world law was crucial for humanity's survival, he said, well, what can I do? I'm just an actor, not a politician. Well, he could pull off a grand act of political theater. So he jumped up in the middle of the United Nations session in 1948, and he said, the nations you represent divide us and lead us to the brink of total war. And he called on the leaders to create a government of, by, and for the people of the planet. Well, of course, the world leaders didn't do that, because Gary soon came to realize, and he wrote that in a very interesting paper called The Top Secret, that they're not going to give up their power. Their whole power is based on protecting us against them in a system of world anarchy.
Right.
The only force that can change that is us. And he went back and he saw that the Declaration of Independence says it is the right of the people to institute new government. Well, he said, now, wait a minute, are they talking about old guys in gray wigs, or do they mean you and I? And the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, which was passed unanimously the day after, Gary rallied 20,000 people in Camus and Sartre and all these French intellectuals who came to his defense when he interrupted the UN. They all were part of it. That Universal Declaration says it is the right of the people to institute new government. And almost every constitution says the same thing, basically. It's based on the will of the people. So then he says, then why are we, knocking our heads against the wall, begging and pleading our government leaders to make peace when they can't do it? They're on the wrong civic level. Their loyalty is to the part, not the whole. The only force that can do it is for we the people to get together, create world law from the bottom up, world law that we enforce not with guns and bombs, but with the incredible people power. I mean, we're the basis of why all these guys exist. We hire them, we create them, we power their military with our funding and we empower their products with what we buy. Once we come together and create world law, we can enforce it with our people power, and then the people of this planet will be the new superpower. And that superpower is the superpower, the only one really, that can save our world at this junction. No one else can. We can't in the same old broken system. Einstein said that.
Well, let me ask you about this. We've been talking about a global capitalist system and a global system of sovereign nation states, right? These two sides of the world system. In some of my writings, I've made the argument that the systems under which we operate, we're born into the system. You and I were born, you were born into a system where you had to crawl under your desk because of the threat of nuclear war, right? And how many people are there like you who resisted that, right? I had to crawl under the desk also, and I thought it was absurd. It was nuts. But how many people in my school resisted it? Most did not. So my point is that it looks like the systems under which we live, both economically and politically, condition our consciousness, tend to condition the consciousness of most people, so that the world leaders who, I think of for the African nations or Cuba, where I've been a number of times, and so on. These small countries that only have become independent, in the case of the African nations, in the 1960s. right? So they went from being territories or colonies to independent nations. And so the consciousness that they have is that this is freedom, right? This is kind of an independence that we have. We're no longer colonially exploited and so on. Now we can be free. And so, when I've gone to Cuba, every time, the Cubans say, first thing they say to me when they know I'm from the United States is, why does your country do this to us? We're a sovereign nation. Don't they realize we're a sovereign nation? What right do they have to blockade us and try to kill our leaders and so on? And this concept of sovereignty is deeply, it seems to me, is deeply embedded in people's consciousness. The need to be part of a sovereign nation. Well, what would you say about that? And in terms of your powerful idea that we, the people, have to be the source of change and create a true federation, has to come from us. How do we overcome this kind of conditioning of consciousness that has to do with the systems under which we now live?
First of all, I think that we don't have to give up on any of the love we have for our land, our cities, our states, our nations. There's concentric levels of citizenship. When Thomas Jefferson and James Madison and the others, came together to create the United States, they didn't give up being Virginians or Marylanders or others. But inside a country like the United States, we don't fight wars. We may still have our disputes, our disagreements. We have even terrorism, like when Tim McVeigh blew up the federal building, in Oklahoma City. But Oklahoma didn't declare war on the Michigan for harboring the Michigan militia. We have handled it as a criminal justice system way. So we're not advocating in any way eliminating the diversity, eliminating the love of land, of our language, of our people. In fact, there would be much more local power and local control if we create an umbrella of protection worldwide for our basic human rights, for our basic right for the planet to exist. It's in fact the war system and the fear that allows them to repress us all over. So what happens is even things that start as a good idea. I mean, you mentioned Karl Marx, and of course, Russia thought, well, we're going to start this, communal society. Well, you see how that got corrupted into the great mass murders and things that happened under Stalin and so on, where, what happens is in each one of these systems, idealistic things get started, but they get crushed it's always because of war. Well, we have to do this. We have to protect our national sovereignty because somebody else is going to get us. And so that makes an excuse to crack down on people. I mean, even Cuba. Well, I'm sure Cuba would like to treat their people better and give them freedom, but how can they when there's a powerful nation, right off their shore, trying to overthrow them? It came out in the church hearings officially from the U.S. government that they were trying to poison their leader or do all this. How can you give people complete freedom to be then, supportive of that? So you end up with a situation with even a country that means well, really oppressing the freedoms of people. So many people there feel very frustrated economically and politically. Well, right. Economically, because of the bad thing, but because politically it's caused restrictions. So in other words, so many of the sufferings that happen in each of these lands happens because they have this war system. And humanity has already invented a system that eliminates war. That's what Gary said. I mean, inside nations where we all accept one government, we don't fight wars. We may have civil wars if there's two sovereignties and so on. We may have, huge problems like in the whole civil rights area, but we see how how advancements happen and how we went from a country where, blacks couldn't even get a drink of water to having a black president. Well, yeah, there's still turmoil and there's still lots of oppression. At least there's some system of law to give us a recourse, something to go back to, something to take a police officer to court because he's, killed people. Whereas out in the world, and people can just kill people at will in wars, and you give them a medal, but you can't. We don't have a system that really can effectively enforce world law. We have international treaties, Kellogg-Briand, that outlaws war technically, with no enforcement. There's no way to really carry it out. They're constantly violated, as we see. So what you're working on with Earth Constitution is really key.
The Earth Constitution, following up on what you're saying, it is a program for ending war. It's not just another way of governing the planet, but if one reads through it carefully, the very first number one of Article 1 says that the function of this Earth Constitution is to end war and disarm the nations. And then in key articles throughout the whole Constitution, the ways to do that, right? Implementing a world judiciary with real authority, implementing a world ombudsman to protect human rights, right? Implementing a non-military world police to enforce world law. From beginning to end, it is a template for not only getting rid of war and military, but reducing violence in the solving of human problems, right? Reducing violence between human beings.
That's fundamental and important because, there have been other proposed constitutions, but they're usually saying, well, the nation states ought to agree to this. They ought to do that.
Right.
And for 75 years, people have been trying to convince them to give up part of their sovereignty to do this. And, it hasn't worked. We've seen a terrific advance with the Council of Europe, but again, they didn't give up really enough of their sovereignty to that really to be a true governing system. They moved forward. It really has to come from the bottom, from we the people. And we also need a way to leapfrog at a higher speed. I mean, let me ask you a question. How do you see the Earth Constitution idea, going viral, connecting all over the world? What's going to bring people into it? I'd like to hear your ideas on that, and then I can share a few.
The next session of the Provisional World Parliament is coming up in December. We're making it into a world historical event. We're going to have top leaders from India there announcing it, and delegates, observers from as many nations as possible. There has to be, as you put it, a crucial something that takes place to make the idea go viral. Another thing that we're doing that is absolutely, I think, important, and this is really connected with your idea of the people. People have to do it because the nations are not going to do it. And that is that the Constitution allows for people to ratify the Constitution directly. It divides the world into 1,000 electoral districts. These electoral districts have citizens within them who we can, and we're working on this right now, we can create digital secure voting for them, voting IDs for them. So we'll actually, before long, we're actually going to have a system in place where a number of world electoral districts will be carefully defined, and people within those districts will be able to vote directly on ratifying the Earth Constitution. So no nations need be involved. Now, they can be, under Article 17, they can be if they want to be, but it's not necessary. It really can come directly from the people.
Think about this. There was a tool that was devised way back in the 1800s. So it was a guy named Robert came up with a thing called Robert's Rules of Order. And before that, you had all these chaotic meetings, no way to come to a conclusion. And he created a system that allowed people to, I second the motion, I throw the motion, we vote for it, aye, nay, and it was an incredible step forward over what happened before. And it was so valuable that even way before the internet, it went viral all over the world. Parliaments do it, groups, organizations, schools. You see this all over the world. Well, what I think now is that we need a new tool that takes us to a next higher level. And that is that one of the things that Gary says in The World is My Country is that it used to be a great tool to send people by horse and buggy to a distant city to meet in the same room, to vote for us. We had to do that in the horse and buggy days. But he says nowadays we can all meet in the same room, the global room. We're all doing it here on these Zoom conferences, connecting all over the world and so on. Well, what if you had a tool that you could use in any group? Like say you have a Jews versus Arabs, Republicans versus Democrats, any group around the world, and you get people into these small groups that are sort of like a Zoom conference, and you have a toolkit on the left hand of ways where you're not saying, okay, who's right and who's wrong, because then you're just going to fight it out. But you say, okay, first of all, what is each person's story? What do they really want in life? What's their goal for their kids? What are their deepest desires? Well, what kind of a world would they like to visualize? What would they like to see in the future?
Right.
And then this toolkit, there's so many things that have been developed from revolutionary conversations, empathic things. There's a million different things, but there's a toolkit that could pop up, and if there starts to be a disagreement saying, would you like help with this? And then it steers to certain questions that can help people come to conclusions. And it helps people build a synergy. A synergy is a step beyond win-lose democracy, 49% lost, 51% won. Nobody's really happy. And what happened is a race to the bottom, because then even though we don't agree with a lot of things, we're all voting for a representative that doesn't really represent who we really are or the full extent of what we are, but it shows like this is the best we can do. So, but if you have something like a consensus, that's even harder. So, maybe I compromise a little, you give a little, but synergy is where you have an interactive system that brings out the highest and best wisdom of each individual and brings that to the table to invent even new things. So, we're inventing new things in this little Zoom conference we're having. Other people are doing that all over the world, like Zoom, but it's not Zoom. It's what Gary called it SmartGov. Say we take a question like, how do we want the air of the earth to be? Well, what kind of future do we see for our atmosphere? Well, I think you start ending up with all the world. Everybody wants clean air. Everybody wants, clean water. They all want, to be able to have things, but have them without having to have such damage to the atmosphere that there's some smog and dying and getting emphysema. So you start coming to these conclusions, and you start finding that all over the world we evolved a law basically that says it's illegal to pollute the atmosphere, and that if you have to manufacture things that are help, you have to have these systems in place that will do it in a circular economy way and so on. And you start doing that all over the world on different systems, and you start finding that we start creating a consensus of what is the will of the people. One of the startling things is that even in the very limited nation-state system, the laws that have come together already are pretty amazing. The Universal Declaration of Human Rights, the rights of women, other rights, the ban on non-nuclear weapons is already law now, international law. It's not enforced because we don't have the system to do it, and we have this broken nation-state system. But, when you start bringing out what are the aspirations, what do people want, you find that all over the world we want the same thing, and and we can do it. Now, once you create this app where people are interactively doing that, and then you interact that app with others all over the world, and you make something so valuable, like look at Facebook. Why did Facebook go so viral that over 1 billion people are in it? Well, why is such a big part of the world's population in this thing called Facebook? Because it met a need they had to connect. There's a need that people have that's even greater than that. More than the need to connect, people want to have some power over the world, some power to change things, power to change the terrible economic things, the diseases that are rampant, like what's happening in India now with COVID, where people want to have power to make things better for their neighbors and friends. Everybody has an instinct. I mean, look at all the volunteerism and the groups like Rotary and everything, people helping others. When you start finding out what are the basic needs, there are similar things that come together. Well, once we start creating that app and start coming to what is the will of the people at the global level, that very will has incredible power. I mean, that's what law is. Law is basically where we come up with what are the common agreements that we all agree on. And for instance, every country in the world has agreed that murder is wrong, is illegal. No. But in the world, it's not. Outside the world, you can kill people and get a medal for it. It's not illegal to murder people. That was the amazing realization that hit Gary. He said, why when I bombed the city of Brandenburg in World War II, why wasn't I arrested? Why weren't the people who killed my brother arrested? Because there's no law. We have to have law out there. But once people create that law has a power that doesn't need guns and bombs to enforce it. I mean, we don't stop at a stoplight because, the policeman's going to come out and shoot us if we don't. I mean, it's because we've got a system of law. It's instituted. It's, as you mentioned, people get used to it. This is the custom. We follow the laws. It works for us. And once we create a system of law, we can enforce it with incredible people power. Like if say a company, despite this Global Clean Air Act, is still saying, oh, the hell with that. I'm going to make my thing so fast. I'm going to pollute the world. The hell with you. Well, then, you go to your app and you go to the store and you're going to buy products. You scan the code. Oh, this company's a world law violator. Oop, this company's, supplying a world law violator. I'm not going to buy that product. I'll buy the other. You go to a job site and you signed up as a world citizen. So you have this app in your computer. It pops up. Oh, nope, this is a world law violator. You don't apply for that job. You're at a shipping company and your union said, nope, we're not going to ship those arms that are going to Saudi Arabia. That's illegal. That's against this world law. And you start finding very soon that once you create a system of world law and an interactive system of court that can make an injunction, and that then instead of people going out to protest and saying, oh, please, company, don't do this, say, no, your company's violating world law. We're shutting you down. We're surrounding your company and nobody's coming in now. So you apply world law. We're enforcers. We've been deputized from the world court of the people and you are violating it. So it's a whole different atmosphere than protest. It goes from protest to power when we the people create the laws and then we the people are enforcing those laws. And we don't need guns and bombs to do it.
The Earth Constitution, in fact, I think they call what you're talking about the common good, right? Laws are about the common good of everybody. And the common good is clean air. The common good is clean water. The common good is peace rather than war, right? The common good is a sustainable environment. And people begin thinking in terms of the common good when there's an interface between the systems in which they live and their lives. Right? So if we live in a system of world law, people will begin thinking in terms of the common good of the planet instead of themselves and so on.
I love your creativity and that you're one of the key people coming together, thinking about this, engaging in it. And creativity really is the key. That it's one of the things that Gary says. He says we human beings are an incredibly inventive species. Why squander our genius inventing smart bombs to do ourselves in? Why not invent SmartGov, a way that we can all interactively bring to and harshly govern our communities, our cities, and our world. And I think that the tool makers that change the world. I mean, you look at it. Tool makers. Bucky Fuller said that you don't fight the old system by struggling against it. You just create something new and attract people to it. Once we create this, this app and this interactive thing where people are finding this is serving them and it takes off and there's a billion people in it, these companies and others, they're going to come running and say, oh, we want to join you, and the nations are going to want to join us. And the others are going to join us because we the people, it's like Gandhi said, there go my people. I'm their leader. I must follow them, Once we the people take the lead and realize it's up to us, we can make that shift. In my movie, The World is My Country, I asked Leonardo DiCaprio, in the movies, at the last minute, the 11th hour, a hero always swoops in to save the day. Who's the hero who's going to save us? And he gives the final word. The last word is you. You are the hero. You are the hero who's going to save us.
That's terrific. I really appreciate talking with you, Arthur. And
let's just invite people to come to our website to see the film. TheWorldIsMyCountry.com is what it's called. Just go to that on the website. TheWorldIsMyCountry.com. Enjoy this movie and then join in our People Powered Planet podcast, where each week we explore the kinds of ideas we're talking about. You've been on it, other great thinkers, and let's work together to build this world that we can visualize. Our visions have power, and that's how we're going to save the world.
Fantastic. To our listeners, I hope you have enjoyed today's dialogue about establishing a living future for the Earth and for all future generations. Our podcast has been recorded, and the link will be streamed to multiple social media outlets and posted on my own website at oneworldrenaissance.com. I would love to hear your thoughts and reactions to this exciting conversation. You can email me at gmartin@earthconstitution.world. This podcast has been made in association with Everscope Multimedia. Thank you all so much for listening, and I hope you have a wonderful day and a wonderful week, and that you will join us in Creativity and Crisis at the same time and place next week. Goodbye for now, be well, and God bless.